Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll invite you to close your prayer books. Just a brief disclosure. This has become a thing. The words I am going to offer are graphic. And so if that feels inappropriate for members of your family to hear, or if it feels inappropriate for you or uncomfortable or triggering, just want to kind of name that from the beginning. Feel free to step away. If you're online, feel free to kind of mute. And I imagine this will be about 15 minutes or so. Something that I guess I'll say before starting. Historically here at this congregation, I haven't spoken about it a lot, but I am a deep lover of Israel. I nearly made Aliyah after my first year living in Jerusalem, and the only reason I didn't is because it would have killed my mother. Truly, that was the only piece. But so I constantly have a yearning to be in Israel, which is kind of a normal thing for me. But when I woke up to the news of this pogrom, it's really nothing less than that, on October 7th, the pull I felt to be in Israel was a pull whose intensity I had not known, had not experienced before. And I think it was very much in keeping with that midrash that I shared a few weeks ago about a person with two heads. And when you pour boiling water or really scalding water on one side of the head, does the other head feel the pain? This notion of collective shared pain. And that's what I felt. And I just wanted to get as close as I could to the people of Israel, as if something about the proximity of that might somehow help to dilute the intensity of the pain felt by Israelis, if I could maybe take a portion of it on myself. And so, as many of you know, last week I joined 7 other rabbis from across the denominational spectrum here in Chicago, along with a group of JUF board members and leaders on a solidarity mission to Israel, whose purpose was first simply to be there, to be present, to be proof of our peoplehood, to be of support. But we were there also to bear witness to what happened on October 7th and what has happened in its aftermath. As you have likely seen, there are many who somehow do not believe that what happened on the 7th actually happened, or who do not believe that it happened as horrifically as it actually happened. We were there, the rabbis in particular, to see it with our own eyes so that we could testify to its accuracy, in particular when encountering those in the larger world with whom we are in relationship who otherwise just don't get it. But beyond that, we were there not just to bear witness to horror and pain, but also to the incredible unity, resilience, and even the hope that is so palpable in the incredible and most profound response of communal care that is manifest across every part of Israeli civilian society. And what I want to be clear about is that there is no distinction, no clear line between this pain and this suffering on the one hand, and this resilience and this hope on the other. They are mixed and they are mingled in every place and in every person. As you may have heard, when asked what day it is, many Israelis will say that though of course the sun rises and sets and time technically moves forward, for them it is just one long day. It is still October 7th. We experienced this strange reality firsthand in our visits to the communities in the Gaza envelope. We visited Sderot, a city probably known for the fact that rockets are regularly launched at it from Gaza. Have you been to Sderot? Might you raise your hand if you've been there? Friends, if you haven't been there, raise your hand if you were with us for Pastor Chris Harris's visit on Yom Kippur. Right? And you likely, if you were there, heard about the work that he's done on the south side of Chicago, inspired by an organization called Natal. Natal is an organization based in Sderot that's meant to help create support for victims of PTSD. So this is where Natal is. So whether you knew about Sderot or not, you actually very much know about Sderot, as Sderot is very much connected to Chicago. Sderot was a city hit incredibly hard on the 7th. With massacres in the streets, our group watched the security camera videos of Hamas terrorists packed in the back of pickup-like truck vehicles, pursuing and shooting anyone they could find. We watched the footage of one of these trucks pursuing a car with 2 parents and 2 young daughters in it. At one point, the car with the family in it stopped in the middle of a road. We watched each parent get out, one from the driver's side, one from the passenger side, hurry to the back seat of each of their respective sides to grab a daughter. The mother and one daughter ran in one direction. The camera showed the father and the daughter he was carrying running in a different direction, followed by the terrorists who had been driving in a cul-de-sac, spraying them with gunshots. The father and daughter fell to the ground, but once they had fallen, they were obscured by a tree. A few seconds later, we could see the arms and legs of the father reaching out from either side, and suddenly, a little girl walking a bit away from her father, back toward, at which point the camera showed another vehicle approaching the girl. The driver turned out to be a security officer. His name is Colonel Kobe Maron. He scooped up this child to drive her to the police station just a few blocks away, only to find the police station under siege. Somehow able to get the little girl to safety and reunited with her sister, who had also been miraculously saved. Tragically, their mother was also shot and killed. This officer was shot twice in the shoulder in this exchange and eventually passed out. Many members of his team were killed right next to him. That police station took such incredible damage that it had to be demolished. And what remains are a few pieces of rebar reaching up from the ground, and an Israeli flag has been hung from that rebar, and all around it yahrzeit candles to remember all the victims who died there that day. Down the street from there, we visited the Magen David Adom Center, which was transformed into a working hospital on October 7th, even though it only contains administrative offices. Many of the Magen David Adom employees and volunteers defied instructions to shelter in place. They showed up at Magen David Adom and took ambulances out to scoop up people who had been attacked in the streets, to bring them back to the secured facility for treatment. Across the street are houses and a school, all with their sukkahs still out, many with tables still set underneath them. We made our way to a yeshiva, and as we climbed the stairs up to the top floor, we passed the 3rd floor, where on the table stood the remnants of a kiddush from that morning, frozen in time, a bottle of wine, a challah, a carton of milk still out, expiration date October 23rd. Besides being frozen in time, every single Israeli we met is traumatized. And I mean that in the clinical sense. At dinner one evening, our group met with Yaron Edel and Amnon Piker, the founders of something called Helem Club In English, you would translate this to be something like shock club or trauma club. It's an innovative social media and community building organization that works to destigmatize PTSD, to empower people to seek out support and treatment. There are, like Natal, many incredible organizations in Israel working on PTSD. However, there is a huge gap statistically between those who suffer from trauma and those who seek out treatment there. Our group witnessed firsthand the impact of this effort, while Yaron and Amnon each shared their personal stories, what caused them to create this organization, discussing the value of telling the stories and experiences of trauma and PTSD publicly. Our group, listening to them, watched as slowly over the course of their remarks, more and more of this restaurant's wait staff and kitchen staff began to stand at the edges of the room, eventually lining most of the walls. We learned the next day that after our group left, a number of the restaurant employees approached Yaron and Amnon to seek out PTSD support for themselves and their loved ones, simply because of the sharing of stories. It's important, I think, to understand that every type of person who lives in Israel was impacted on the 7th. And many important groups are working to ensure that everyone gets the support and services they need. Along these lines, our group met with Cher Albaz and Ilan Amit, the co-CEOs of Ajik, an Arab-Jewish center for equality, empowerment, and cooperation that had been founded by the incredible peace activist Vivian Silver, who was murdered on October 7th at Kibbutz Be'eri. Cher, a Bedouin social worker, shared many stories of the incredible heroism of the Bedouin throughout the Negev, who jumped in their own vehicles to head to the Nova Party and many other areas that were attacked to shuttle survivors to safety. And they shared their important work, this group, in ensuring that all who live in Israel receive equal support from the government in their healing and in their recovery. Our group visited Kfar HaMaccabiyah, usually a beautiful and expansive athletic campus. Imagine East Bank with a hotel and lots of land. And this organization that is really the global center for the Maccabi Games, many of you are likely familiar with that, essentially the Jewish Olympics. We could talk about that another time. On October 8th, by that morning, the entire administration of Kfar HaMaccabiyah had agreed to completely pivot their organization to become a humanitarian aid center, providing housing, schooling, meals, childcare, a clothing store where everything is new and free, and most importantly, community for hundreds of evacuees. And Kfar HaMaccabiyah intends to continue to do this until they are all home. And they do this free of charge for everyone in need. And Kfar HaMaccabiyah used their open land to create a retreat center for the survivors of the Nova Party, to receive immersive psychological therapy and support with the goal of preventing or limiting their experience of PTSD, which is most likely to unfold soon. And there is so much more. But what continues to both haunt and inspire me the most was the time we spent at kibbutz Nir Oz. This lush and beautiful kibbutz strewn with birds of paradise, literally, less than 1 mile from the Gaza border, is made up completely of progressive, peace-pursuing people. People known for their commitment to coexistence and the peace process. People known for shuttling Gazans in need of medical care from the border fence to Israeli hospitals. 1/4 of these people were murdered or kidnapped on the 7th, with much of the kibbutz utterly desecrated, set ablaze, or destroyed. When we arrived there, the smell still in the air was a smell I have experienced once before in my life. in the days and weeks after September 11th in New York. It is difficult for me to describe the extent of destruction and massacre that I witnessed while there, 8 weeks later, 2 full months later. The extent of the defilement, the burnt out, the shattered, the blood-stained. This haunts me. The homes whose inhabitants were kidnapped have hostage posters on their doors. You likely know one of these families, the Bibas family, comprised of parents named Yardain and Shiri, and their 2 red-headed children, 4-year-old Ariel and 11-month-old Kafir. The homes where people were murdered sit as silent monuments, desecrated with only wreckage of the objects of the people who once made this place paradise. While there, our group met with Amit Rubin, who grew up at Nir Oz, and whose parents, daughter, and son-in-law miraculously survived the attack on October 7th by remaining in their sealed room until a point when it had filled with so much smoke because their home had been bombed that they snuck out through a small ventilation hole, dropped down into garbage cans. The parents are in their late 80s, covered themselves with all sorts of flower pots, and by luck, were not further pursued. Amit Rubin, who lives in the Galil, along with 4 others originally from Nir Oz, has been staying at Nir Oz since October 8th, having to do some of the most gruesome and devastating work of caretaking for what remained and remains there after every survivor was evacuated. As you have likely heard, this refrain, Ein Milim, there are no words, is true. There are no words suitable to express the depth of unconditional and sacred care that these people have done and continue to do. It is important for me to tell you that Amit has no affect. When he took us from home to home, shared with us the names and stories of the people who lived in each home, told us about their rich and full lives up to that day, guided us over broken piles of china, scorched wheelchairs and children's bicycles, the ashen remains of pieces of hundreds of family photos, told us the story of his own family's miraculous survival, walked us through the glass-covered floor of the dining hall whose windows had been shot out, that reeked of rotten food and decaying bodies because it had served as an impromptu morgue for the first weeks after the 7th, whose dining hall tables had been set by the family members of those taken hostages with the posters in their places. No affect, all trauma, and at once all resolve. Every afternoon, Amit and the 4 others still tend to the kibbutzim's fields. It was avocado season, so they were heading out to harvest that afternoon. Amit then shared that in the coming weeks they would begin preparing for the next growing season. He said, "And after this, we will still plant our seeds." To be sure, one of our responsibilities in the wake of the 7th is to continue to bear witness to the evil of that day. But so too, and I think perhaps more importantly, we are to bear witness to the response in the face of evil. The response not of the government of Israel, but of Israeli civil society, who was and remains the body of heroes, saviors, literally, redeemers in its fullest sense. One of our teachers, the clergy's teachers here, and I think a teacher to all of Chicago, Rabbi Yechiel Pupko from the JUF, says that the contemplation of evil is not ennobling. Rather, it is the focus and dedication of restoration, return, and repair that can, and dare I say, should and must guide where we direct our sightlines now, our energies, our actions. So if you're looking for guidance, here are a few things you can do to be of support. First and foremost, continue to reach out to friends and family in Israel. Continue to check in on them, to let them know you care. This is critically important and priceless. Second, you can donate. I know so many of you want to know the things you can donate. However, by and large, the need for physical items has decreased. But the not-for-profit organizations in Israel need financial support. We are recommending, and I can second this now as I have witnessed the effect of the JUF's Israel Emergency Fund. This ensures that 100% of the donations are given directly to a broad swath of civilian-led organizations on the ground, making a real difference. If you have questions about this fund, if you have not in the past supported JUF and want to talk about that, please feel free to reach out to me. I feel very strongly about this for any number of reasons. Would be happy to engage with you in a conversation. And third, for those for whom it is possible and are comfortable in doing so, go to Israel. I'm happy to say, or announce, I guess I should say, that Rabbi Green is putting a trip together for this congregation in March. More news about that, we hope, in the next week. Or if that doesn't work for you, join one of the many volunteer missions popping up through JUF, JNF, Taglit Birthright, whatever it might be. If you're curious about how to make that possible for yourself, where to go, any of us are happy to direct you along those lines. As I've shared before, when it comes to hope, I prefer the definition offered by the first president of the Czech Republic, Václav Havel. He shares that hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. This was the kind of hope that everyone we met shared with us in Israel. It is the hope that Rachel Goldberg, mother of Hirsch Goldberg Poland, shared with us when we met with her, as she left our entire group astounded by her strength, resolve, and commitment to hope and faith in humanity, despite everything that has happened to her personally. It's a hope that she shared in an incredible poem she wrote titled "One Tiny Seed." She shared this poem earlier this week, and I'll conclude with it tonight. There is a lullaby that says your mother will cry 1,000 tears before you grow to be a man. I have cried 1,000,000 tears in the last 67 days. We all have. And I know that way over there, there's another woman who looks just like me because we are all so very similar. And she has also been crying. All those tears, a sea of tears, they all taste the same. Can we take them, gather them up, remove the salt, and pour them over our desert of despair and plant one tiny seed? A seed wrapped in fear, trauma, pain, war, and hope, and see what grows? Could it be that this woman, so very like me, that she and I could be sitting together in 50 years, laughing without teeth because we have drunk so much sweet tea together? And now we are so very old, and our faces are creased like worn-out brown paper bags. And our sons have their own grandchildren. And our sons have long lives. One of them without an arm. But who needs 2 arms anyway? Is it all a dream? A fantasy? A prophecy? One tiny seed. Shabbat shalom.